Okay, so today's A2, and again, same as AS the other week, we spent some time looking at topic areas for revision. We've picked topic areas we think might come up in the exam. We have no knowledge of the exam paper. We're just guessing like everybody else. Can I obviously say, nice and early, this is not your revision sessions. These are just 2 additional revision sessions if you're coming back tomorrow as well, with some ideas of what we think might come up in the exam. We are not really that perfect at doing this. We thought Liverpool would win the Premiership. So, you know, give us a chance. This stuff we do, yeah, it's good revision, do the revision, but please, no guarantees at all that the stuff we cover is going to come up in the exam. It's just a few thoughts. We're only going to cover 16 topics. There's certainly about 50 topics in the whole exam paper, so we're doing about 1/3 of the course. The other 2/3 are your responsibility for your revision, but we might just be able to help with some thoughts. Okay, the outline of today's program, we're going to look at the following 8 topic areas, again because we think these are quite possibly coming up. They've not been up for the last few years, and therefore sort of, if you like, are missing from the most recent exam papers. So EPOC, lactate threshold, supplements, POMS, cognitive methods, distraction conflict theory, world games, and drugs as the broad idea. We work through nice and slowly. We give you time to answer some questions. We give me time to answer any questions you think of that we can put into the chat window. If there are any questions, stick them in. It's totally anonymous. We just know where the center is, not who is actually writing the questions. Try to answer them, but please give me time to answer. Answering questions and typing and speaking to everybody else is a pretty difficult task for me. Multitasking at my youthful age is a bit difficult. Okay, let's get the show on the road. Everybody happy? You should have a printout of the materials that look like PowerPoint slides with blank spaces, lots of blank space on many of them. So we're going to try and fill in the blank spaces. Sometimes we'll ask you to do that. Sometimes I'll give you the information yourself. About halfway through, 1 o'clock-ish, we'll have a break, 5 minutes for chilling out, and then we're back onto the thing. And we promise you we'll finish before 2. How long before 2? Don't know. That's how it goes. Okay, so lactate threshold. All the stuff today is based on past paper questions. I've tried to look back at past paper questions and sort of guess what sort of things might come up if the examiner tends to ask the same sort of questions again. So lactate threshold and EPOC and all that sort of rubbish, sort of questions that have been asked so far, apart from what is lactate threshold, what is EPOC, are things like the ones on the screen at the moment. The relationship between VO2 max and lactate threshold is quite a difficult concept for people to grasp. We'll talk about that for a bit. And in terms of recovery, I think it's a nice question, this. Explain the relationship between lactate threshold and the functions of EPOC. Then you have to understand 2 things to get marks. Okay, so let's look at these sort of ideas. We're going to be able to, hopefully, after we've done the bit of the presentation, then this question can then be answered. So if you like your homework, or when you've got lunch later today, or when you've got after school or after college tonight, these questions will then be answered, so it's still fresh in your head. So I'm not going to actually go through the answers to this exactly, we're just going to sort of talk around it. But answering these questions should then become a matter of course later on during your revision. Okay, lactate threshold. Lactate threshold occurs during really intense exercise of fairly short duration. We use glycogen as an energy source. However, in that breakdown of glycogen, we produce too much pyruvate. Okay, so there's your first test. Glycogen is broken down to pyruvate. What's the name of that process? There's a yellow rectangle on the screen. On your notes, there should be a space. Write in the word. What's the name of the phrase? Or the phase, sorry. Glycogen to pyruvate is called, hopefully you shoved in the word glycolysis or the term glycolysis. This is not a test, so if you're struggling with this, ask questions. Ask the person sat next to you. Ask the teacher if he's there, she's there. Okay, so during really intense exercise, a fairly short duration, you actually produce too much pyruvate for the body to cope with. Being exact, if you're into your physiology, for the mitochondria to cope with. And the excess pyruvate, is then converted into this waste product, which in some centers you've called lactate, in other centers you've called lactic acid. Both terms are correct. Keep using the one you're used to. So this intense exercise of fairly short duration, where you're going to convert some pyruvate into lactate, can only last fairly short time. Write down in your own words some ideas of how long we can cope with lactate being produced. What sort of time span we're talking about here? And hopefully you're suggesting it's things that are lasting maybe 30 seconds to 2 minutes. It depends heavily on how intense. It depends heavily on how fit you are. So for example, unfit people will struggle at approaching 20 to 30 seconds of hard exercise. They produce so much lactate, they'll be struggling. Very, very fit performers, Olympic level performers, can probably go for a good 2 minutes with loads and loads of lactate sloshing around and still cope with it. So we're looking, if you want to talk about activities, you're looking at 400-meter runners. 400-meter runners are going to run this thing in sort of 45, 60 seconds. If we convert that into swimming, we're looking at people who are swimming 100 meters in about a minute-ish. Maybe double that, 200 meters swimming. Elite performers, maybe 800 meters of running. Cyclists who are doing maybe 1,000 meters pursuit in just over a minute. That sort of time scale. So you might find this in an exam being phrased as a question about one particular activity, but there will be, I'm almost certain there will be some indication of how long this activity lasts to give you a clear idea of what we're talking about. When we're talking about exercise, it's very, very hard, very, very intense, relatively short duration in terms of 30 seconds to 2 minutes-ish, then we're into this lactate acid or lactic acid production system. Okay, I like students to use diagrams whenever possible, and many of you have suffered my words before. Many of the teachers that are at your center have suffered my words before, and they'll understand this. So during high intensity exercise, what's going on? We can see this nice little piece of arrows going down to the yellow sausage-shaped thing, which we call the mitochondria. So we're, from the previous slide, we're breaking down glycogen. Can you fill in the missing space? Glycogen is broken down to what? So at the end of that first broad arrow, it's broken down to, put in the missing word. Hopefully you've thrown in the word pyruvate, because that's what we were talking about on the previous slide. Can we name that process again, please? Put the name across the arrow. It's revision. Okay, you should have put glycolysis in there. And you should also note that during glycolysis we do produce some, and I use that word carefully, some ATP. We can resynthesize some ATP. And those that are doing physiology in terms of their biology A level will know exactly how many molecules of ATP. But for the last 10 years, some, S-O-M-E, has been allowed as the amount of ATP being produced by glycolysis. So glycolysis produces ATP, some ATP, not a lot, just some. The pyruvate's there, and then what I've tried to show is that there is some pyruvate will still go into the mitochondria, where there is Krebs cycle and the electron transfer chain, and loads of ATP being resynthesized, but quite a bit of that pyruvate will be converted into the waste product that we call, do you want to put it